Giancarlo, and I will be doing my analysis on The Ballot or the Bullet by Malcolm X. So, a little bit of background on Malcolm X. He was born on May 19th, 1925, at Omaha, Nebraska. He was married to Betty Shabazz and had six children with her. He was a minister and he practiced the religion of Islam. His ideals were centered on black power, Pan Africanism, and autonomy within black economy. And the speech Ballard the Bullet, which we had to read in class, reflect much of his ideologies. He was sadly assassinated in 1965. So I centered my paper on the early contemporaries versus modern contemporaries on how they viewed his speech. And what I found interesting is that early contemporaries had somewhat of a mixed reaction since it was still the 60s, late 70s. It was the civil rights movement was still ongoing. And in it, the one of the first things I found was that it did not completely sway white America. However, the speech Ballot of the Bullet really did plant this seed that will eventually be a lesson, or they will look at it as reference to why anti-black racism was such a huge problem, or is such a huge problem today, even in the contemporary moment. Although this shift did not give white America the absolution it sought, it thoroughly uprooted and transformed Malcolm X's previous rhetoric of dissent. So this kind of paves way for an alternative campaign to the civil rights movement. However, Malcolm X and this speech really did sway college students because Stokely Carmichael says that Malcolm made a hell of an impression on these students. Youth came back elated, just elated, and talking about nothing but Malcolm. College students, especially of African descent, in both the United States and across the international stage, really were captivated by this speech. So you can see that there were still like a mixed analysis on the ballot or bullet speech. However, in modern contemporaries, when we look at the ballot or bullet speech, we see that much of what Malcolm is saying is true, that there is still injustice happening against African Americans and anyone of African ancestry in the United States. And his speech really serves as this dissenting tool in order to fight anti-black racism. It's important that we take a look at the speech in order to get a sense of understanding of what was it like, what Malcolm was feeling essentially. The speech represented Malcolm X's vision of an independent black politics that would shape perspectives on black political life for decades, according to Johnson. And in Terrell, he says, provides a case studies of an orator investing a discourse of oppositional prudence that has the potential to emancipate his audience from limitations imposed by the dominant culture. The second quote really struck to me because this speech is what gives audiences a firsthand perspective, and it allows them to think for themselves that anti-black racism is still a dominant culture in our society today, especially with the new Jim Crow system. Why his ideals matter. A big reason why I think his ideals still matter is, as a history major, I think that we have to take a look that social control over African Americans is still common today and it's still being utilized. Mass incarceration, police brutality, voter suppression, housing segregation, employment discrimination, and still there are many methods today that contain African Americans. And while we see that it's not as the ones utilized in the 60s and before the Civil War, we can see that African Americans are still being controlled today. And this speech allows us to see that. My personal thoughts over this is that as we approach the first year anniversary of George Floyd's death, we have to take a look at the struggle of African Americans in the country. The fight is still ongoing to this day, and we have a long way to go. His teachings still remain as true as ever in the present moment as we take a look at different approaches on how to achieve social equality. And through the power of solidarity and unity through Black Power, it can be pivotal tools to achieving full prosperity. So, yeah, those are my personal thoughts, and these are my citations. So, thank you very much.